Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my bunny bonnet that I ended up making. So it turned out super cute. I love it so much. Let's go. Okay, for the first half, let's talk about the setup. So I'm going to link everything that I technically did buy for this craft in the description. So that includes the fabric that I used. And I really just mostly bought the fabric, but I'm gonna go over the tools that I kind of already had so you guys can know if you can make this or if you can just like follow along and like, you know, replace things and see if it'll work for you. For the materials, I got some of them off Amazon and some of them from Hobby Lobby. So I got the pink satin silk from Amazon and I'll link it down below, and then I got the white fur from my local Hobby Lobby. I will say they're no more than a yard in length, and that's basically all the fabric that you need for the bonnet. So the fabric was the only materials that I ended up getting, but there are some materials that I used that I had laying around that I'm going to talk about now. So I had elastic laying around. This is going to be the band for the bonnet, which you need. Tools that I had laying around that I used would be measuring tape, a cutting board, the roller cutter. I just call it a pizza wheel. It is not a pizza wheel. The pizza wheel, clips, pins, scissors, chalk, pencil, and of course a sewing machine. I did this all using my Singer sewing machine. So yeah, that's basically it. I followed a simple tutorial that I do want to link in the description too. She was super helpful. Just to make a regular bonnet, my bonnet ended up, full stop, my bonnet ended up being larger than I anticipated. So if you're following this step, just know I followed, I guess, a jumbo bonnet tutorial. So if you have like a lot of hair or you need like a larger bonnet, this is for you. And also I made my own measurements for everything other than the base of the bonnet. So yeah, now let's get into it. I'm going to divvy this up into 3 different sections. I'm going to do the cutting section, the sewing ear section, and then making the bonnet section. And so those are going to be the 3 sections that I kind of split this video up into. Each should be a sizable length, but I will make sure to put measurements and any other specific notes and try and get through it as quick as I can. So for the cutting, I'm just going to go through and say what I did and list anything else that I need somewhere on the screen, or anything else that you need to know somewhere on the screen. In order to start, we need to start with the base of the bonnet. And so what I ended up doing was cutting out 29 inches by 29 inches of the fabric. So I took the yard fabric that I had, cut it down to 29 inches exact to form a square. And I ended up kind of marking it with chalk just to make sure, obviously, I had everything right before doing the cutting. One thing that I did to make sure that I was cutting straight was I actually had 2 cutting boards, one on the bottom and one on the top. And that was just to line it up because the silk was easily movable, so it was really helpful for me to have something to apply pressure to where when I cut, the lines were completely straight. And then what you're going to do is fold it into 4s, and so, or fold it to where it has 4 pieces. So fold it in half once and fold it in half another time, and it should have 4 individual pieces. And with those 4 individual pieces, we are going to do most of our work from the corner that connects all of them. So there is a connecting corner we don't want to cut. It's going to be where everything else kind of like spreads out in almost like a radius. And so what I did from there is I was able to fold it nicely and then measure out 14 inches across the 4th folded fabric. And so I just measured it out with, I'm pretty sure, like a pencil, and just like going from the corner that I cannot cut across. And so I just kind of like did that a few different times just for me to make enough points to where I could connect it in almost like a semicircle, and then I just ended up cutting. I believe I cut it with the roller thing just so it was smooth and the scissors wouldn't make it look chunky, but that was basically it. So by the end of this, after you're done, you should have a circular base, and that is our silk base. And so now moving on to the fur, one thing to save time is I just got the silk base, pinned it down to the fur and then just cut the fur around it. So that way there's no more measuring or dotting or fourth folding. And this is good too because the fur fabric, you guys, is really dense. So it is hard if you try and fold the fur fabric. It's much easier just to lay the silk base out first, then cut the fur around it. Now we're gonna move on to the silk ears. This requires a lot of measuring and cutting, and I'm going to start getting into specifics. And so the ears are of my own creation. There's not really anything out there that I could see so far as a template. So these are just my measurements. If you want them bigger, if you want them smaller, if you look at this tutorial and you're like, I wanted my ear to look like this, then you can change measurements as you see fit. But this is just kind of like what I have. For the ears, the main points of measurement that you need would be the top, the middle, and the bottom. Those are the main points of measurements. And that's where we're going to end up doing most of our dotting and our cutting. It's going to be about 14.5 inches for the silk, and then 15 inches for the fur. The silk is going to be in the middle of the ear, so it has to be the bunny ear, so it has to be smaller, and the fur is kind of like around it, if that makes any sense, or a little bit larger. So the fur part of the ear should be larger than the silk part, which we'll get to. For the silk, it's going to be 14.5. For the full thing, it's going to be 1/4, 2.5, and then 1 inch. And then it's going to be 14.5 lengthwise, and then 7 would be the middle. Basically what I did for the silk, my cutting method, is I just kind of traced it out on the silk after getting those points of reference, which are super important. I just kind of traced out the ear to my liking. It is okay if it looks a little weird. It's okay, you guys, it's okay. It's fine. And so I ended up folding it and then cutting, so that way once I cut, it would have 2 pieces. And we move on to the fur. Now I personally, again, I used the silk as kind of like a reference, and what I did is I took the silk and kind of pinned it to the fur fabric that I had and just kind of went 1/2 inch out on each of the sides. The amount of inches, I guess, it would be 15, so I did have to measure that out. Instead of it being 14.5, the fur ears are going to be 15 inches, but it's going to be 1/2 inch on each of the sides. That way it's a lot bigger than the silk part. Then I used, of course, the silk ear as a drawing guide as well, making sure that everything lined up and it looked nice. And sketched onto the bottom half of the fur, because obviously you can't go through the fur fabric. And then I just cut it, and then I used the fur ear that I cut out as a template for the next fur ear. That's basically it for the base of the bonnet and the ears and all that I cut. So now we're going to move on to the sewing of the ears. And I will say this is probably the most difficult part, just because it required a lot of material manipulation. So if you have not sewn before, just get ready. But I believe in you. I think you can do it. So the first thing that I had to make was the ears. And so what you want to do is pin the ears together. Obviously, that's the first step. You want to make sure that the silky part of the ears and the fur part of the fur fabric are kissing each other, that they're facing. Also, the hardest part is making sure when you are pinning them together not to leave any room. All ends should be touching. It is going to look a little weird. It almost at the end kind of looks like silk on top and fur on the bottom, and it kind of makes like a cone shape, like a boat. That's fine. That is completely fine. But what you do want to do is to make sure that the ends of the silk fabric and the fur fabric on every corner of the ear are touching, and that's how you want to pin them. When I ended up finishing with the pinning and pinned all the ears together, I moved on to the sewing. Basically, to sew, I kind of used, I don't know what kind of stitch it's called. I kind of looked it up, and it's called an overcast stitch. Basically what I did, I looked at my sewing machine, saw which one would go over the edge, and I just kind of chose that one. I know you could do a zigzag. I know you could do a bunch of different other sewing options, but I just chose the one that has like basically a line straight down, and every once in a while it kind of goes off the edge to hook the fabric in. And so yeah, that's basically what I did. I just made sure to sew off of the edge all the way around, taking my pins out as I go. It's okay if you struggle a little bit with the fabric, or if you're sewing it and it's getting a little crumpled and wrinkled. You won't be able to see it once we finish what we're about to do with our ears. Make sure you don't really have to close the top part of the ear. You don't have to sew up there. Actually, don't sew it, because what you're gonna have to do is turn it inside out. So what you're gonna do after you're done sewing is reach in there. I kind of used a pencil, I'm pretty sure, just to like push it all the way through, but we're gonna turn the ears inside out, so that way we can see both the silk and the fur and we're facing the right way. And that's basically it. Those are for our ears. I did them for both sides. Now we're gonna go to kind of like the ear placement. And so one thing that I do want to say, that because I haven't seen a tutorial for a bunny bonnet before, you cannot sew the bonnet until the ears are completed and sewn on, and then only then can you start making the bonnet. With the fur fabric that we cut, I ended up kind of making a 5-inch gap at what I determined to be the bottom of the fur template. And so then after I made that 5-inch gap, I kind of determined where the middle would be. So obviously if it's 29 by 29, I think I made the middle at 14-ish inches. So I measured 14 inches up, and I kind of made sure when I put the ears on that I want them to be kind of to the side. I don't want the bunny ears to be in the middle. I want them to be to the side. So after I measured my 14 inches up, I measured 7 inches out on each side. That's what I ended up doing, just leaving that crown area untouched. And so then I kind of cut out holes, and what we're gonna do is placing the ears inside of those holes in the fur fabric. Make sure to sew the ears on right, and so obviously they both have to be facing the same way. We're going to be doing fur to fur, so you're going to take the ear, like flip the fur template over, take the ears, and then insert them from the outside. And so it should kind of like, once we insert it, you can sew like kind of like across. But what I do want to say is the fur should be touching the fur, the silk should be facing up, and the ears should be drooping and facing the bottom, the 5-inch gap. And so that's the most important part. After you get that, you just kind of sew them together. And that's it. One thing that I do want to say is that the thread technically doesn't matter. I think preferably this can all be done in white, this sewing phase. That's basically it for our sewing ear section. And now we're going to move on to our sewing bonnet section, which should be our last one. Okay, now we're going to move on to our final step, which would be sewing the bonnet together. And so of course we have our 5 inches open at the bottom, and so we're going to start from there. And so one thing that we want to do is to face the fur and the silk should be facing each other, like I said before. And so since we've sewn the ears on, this is a good time to say the ears should be inside. So almost think of it like a hot pocket. The ears should be inside. The silk should be facing the fur, and all of that should be on the inside. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew 1/2 inch in all the way across, of course, and leaving that 5-inch gap. So after that, you can flip it inside out. These are when the ears should come out, the fur should come out, the silk should be coming out, and it all should be facing out now. So now what we're gonna do is kind of make the ruffles of the bonnet. Now, one thing that I do want to say, my ruffles, if you look at my bonnet, are a little bit extreme. If you don't want ruffles this big, I recommend playing with the inches and figuring out really what would work for you. I will say my ruffles are 2 inches in. So if you don't want your ruffles to be as big as mine, then I say you can do maybe 1.5 inches in, just to your liking. But I did mine as 2. And so basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna create 2 rings. One of the rings is going to be how long you want your ruffle to be, and the second ring is going to be where we're going to be inserting the elastic. So for the first ring, I just kind of like measured 2 inches all the way across the circle of the bonnet, and then just kind of connected them together. So one ring, 2 inches in, and then I'm going to go 1/2 inch out and then do another ring. And so for that second ring that is 1/2 inch out, you have to leave the same 5-inch gap that should be on your bonnet as before. Again, I say sewing a straight stitch. I just did this all with straight stitching and sewing. I think if your sewing machine isn't heavy duty or if it's like super tiny, I don't know if it's going to be able to get through both the fur and the silk. I know my sewing machine kind of had some issues kind of like sewing over the fur, but if your sewing machine is kind of like heavier duty, then I think you should be okay. Preferably how I did this is sewing from the silk side. You can't see through the fur. What we're going to do is kind of like an offhand step or a side step. You can start this at the beginning or you can wait till now. I just waited till now. We're going to cut the elastic. And so I just kind of measured elastic that I had laying around across my head. I kind of made it a little tight with just a tiny bit of tension. And so what you're gonna do is get a safety pin and then connect it to the elastic, and you're going to feed it through the 1/2 inch slot that you have all the way around to get back to the other end. So with that 5-inch gap, you should start on one side, feed it through, and then end on the other side. And of course, once it comes out on the other side, making sure that the elastic is facing the right way, making sure that it did not get turned around in your bonnet. That is really important. You're going to sew them one on top of each other. So what I did is I just, kind of pinned them together and went back and forth, front stitch, back stitch, regular straight stitch, just front and back. That was really the last step with the elastic. And then to finish the bonnet off, all you kind of have to do is close the 5-inch gap. The easiest way that I did it was folding the fur over onto the silk and then just kind of sewing it. That's basically it. In conclusion, I am very happy with how my bonnet turned out. This is my first time sewing any type of bunny bonnet. I really wanted to do it because I was just like, hey, I really want a bunny bonnet. I've been seeing it on TikTok. I'm not about to spend like $30 on it. I was like, I could just get some fabric and make it. And it was more satisfying because now it's like customized to my liking. Yeah, that's basically it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.